This video is about practical solutions for practical problems in the case of not letting book burners burn down our history. If you actually care about this, no matter what your ideological, political, or social or religious bent is, watch. For disclosure, so I run off the people who will hate click away, I'm a liberal. There, that should have gotten rid of most of the most ignorant book burners in the bunch. We're going to be talking about persistence of vision visually, and film recording, and video frames per second, and audio frames per second, and sample rates. I'm going to be doing a whole series on this. A flickering light bulb, or a strobe, or anything else like that visually, depending on the conditions, you can have widely varying abilities to detect, whether you're looking straight at it or looking to the side, which detects the flicker easier. Light bulb or other item doing this will be seen as steady or a sequence of smooth motions, and or will work with pictures or just a light source. To a human being, in general, for the majority of the population, even if they can detect it, they can tolerate it, at any of the following frequencies, depending on conditions, whether they've had too much coffee, etc. 24, 25, 30, 48, 50, and 60, or more. And basically, if you shoot for the average Joe not being able to detect a disturbance in the force or a repeat in the matrix, you can't see the cat repeating, that can go up to like 400 frames a second. Yeah, if you're playing a video game, you can detect frame rates that are below 200 pretty easily sometimes. The max fusion frequency as frames per second, or images per second, or pulses per second, is 15 for rods and 60 for cones. Color vision needs 60 frames a second. And rods for light detection only requires 15, but it swaps for another reason. The way we detect light changes. So going above 60 is recommended just to make sure nothing reacts. Let's go on. For most human beings, without any other stimulus, in average conditions, on and on and on it goes. We talk about your presumed idealized spherical human here, as they joke about mathematically. Film works acceptably well from 16 frames a second to 26 frames a second, depending on the theater or TV system, etc. Interlacing odd and even fields can cheat smoothness and work at much lower or higher frequencies, but we use them at 50 and 60 frames per second because of the pulse rate for lights, because pulse rates below 50 cycles a second made the lights pulsate in a way that we could see out of the corner of our eyes. And in Britain they use 50, and in the United States we use 60, just to give it a little extra wiggle room. The electric grid is where this comes from light flickering. And also this affected, if you weren't aware of it, neon transformers. So neon lights would flicker and pulsate when they got old, but when they were brand new and everything was perfect, didn't see it. Later on, we decided to fix a visual problem induced by this because of the power line, the signal, the radio signals, and noise in the area, and made it 59.94 frames a second to fix something called dot crawl. So do we have to use a multiple of that? Let's move on. The majority of average human viewers, again, we're doing another one, can individually process 10 frames per second at the low end, or less. But above 10 frames per second, the majority of people will start seeing it and be allowing for it being considered full motion, even though they're consciously aware that it's frames. They may perceive image persistence only at higher rates over 50 frames a second, but it can be all the way down to 10 frames a second, what we would consider a slideshow in the gaming universe. A sequence of pictures is considered stable, steady, etc. when we have, let's say, a modulated or pulsing light source seeming non-flickering or continuous. Lighting up the same picture repeatedly is seen as it just being lit up normally at around that, 50 frames a second or higher. That's why they used it in Britain for the power lines, among other things. Or not. Look up the history. Someone will correct me in the comment section, and I'm sure that you're absolutely a mod on Reddit. 80 is considered the upper end, where you end up with so many people out of the population not detecting any flicker that it doesn't annoy them and or they can't see it. So that would be the better one, which is a multiple of 40, so okay. Non-uniform modulated light, however, for being seen as full stability and smooth motion if you modulate it, for all people requires 480 frames a second. So you can't detect it even if you try to induce it. Even if it's technically there, it won't be seen. Now, one bug goes near there. In the 400 frame a second and above, we have the black fire beetle that's able to detect pulsations at 400 frames a second. So we have to have beetle bug level frame rate detection being prevented. So there's no such thing as a frame rate or recording rate or whatever you're going to call it that's utterly perfect where we won't detect something that doesn't look real. Somebody will be too picky and somebody won't give a shit and can look at literally 1920s video, actually film, that was recorded at 14 frames a second to save film cost. And it will be fine. And most of us can accommodate it. It's how picky we are about it. During eye movement, because our eyes move suddenly, we can detect pulses because they just strobe across our vision up to 2,000 to 3,000 cycles per second. So lighting systems and electrical ballasts have to work at 3,000 frames a second minimum. Compare that to audio recording, where if you're doing the sample and hold circuit, 120,000 cycles per second is needed for your sample rate. But people regularly listen to lower sample rate. But if you listen to a high enough frequency violin, you'll detect noise. For lighting, we need to have 3,000 cycles per second for anything that might create flicker and strobe effects if we have to move our eyes quickly. Long persistent phosphor white LEDs, ironically, that people complained about most, eliminate the need for it and work down to 60 cycles a second easily because they hold the brightness level very nicely. So unless you're really picky, you're not going to have a problem with that. Fluorescent lights are worse because they literally do have a deeper cycle to this. The phosphor on an LED is done in multiple layers and is spread out in such a way that it creates a kind of propagation effect, I guess. LEDs work at very low frequencies. In fact, I was able to get one down to 14 pulses per second and not be able to detect it because it had a long persistence phosphor. Film formats can last 70 years or more if stored in ideal archival conditions in a vertical on-end orientation at 35% relative humidity. For color film, 35 Fahrenheit. For pre-1970 acetate-based black and white film as well. 65 Fahrenheit or cooler for modern polyester black and white films is needed. But for most of them, 35 degrees Fahrenheit is a sweet spot for everything. And that's it for the film part of this. Not doing digital. This is about film. This is about frames per second, and this is about video or frame showing. And this is about the fact that they can last 70 years. Do you want your books preserved? You can put them on film. Do you want audio recordings kept? You can do that. Would you like to use an enormous version of a QR code to contain an entire song? You can do that on high-end film. You can microfilm books. I'm bringing this up because it's not all over the world. A lot of you people in the United States don't get it. It's just our country right now going through the 100-year cycle of going right back to fascism. And with fascism comes history revisionism. You thought people putting up ancient aliens videos was annoying? People walking into your library and burning every fucking book and flipping you off and peeing on your kids. Or shooting them. That's what you're looking forward to. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.